Welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I have with me today just the loveliest guest who was paid, I would have to say, the best compliment that you could be paid by another human being. Let's get into all things about Jerry Herman. This is Jane Dorian. Jane, how are you today?
I am fantastic and so happy to be here with you.
Thank you. I met you 5 minutes ago, and I've just had the loveliest time already talking to you. I think this is going to be a great conversation.
I know it will.
So I alluded to what Jerry said about you, that you were the most important person in his life. And I gather from our conversation earlier that he really made you feel like that.
It was a magical relationship. There was never a time in my life until 2019 that Jerry wasn't an integral part of my life. He was there the day I was born. I was named after him, Jerry Jane. And I think it's very special to see the world through the eyes of a child. And I really never knew he was famous or anything. It was just a pure relationship. And we truly loved one another. And he and my mother were truly the best of friends. And we were a family. I mean, one of the questions I always get is, how does a Jewish girl get a godfather? And I always say it's because we created our own family. And I think that's sort of the strength of the relationship. And that kind of, I think, tied through all the way to Lacage. Because, you know, how do you define a family? It's by those people who love you and care for you every single day of your life. And that was it. And some things you never had to ask. I mean, at one point, Jerry had to have open heart surgery. And I showed up at 4:00 in the morning before they took him in, and he couldn't believe it. And he said, I was scared. He said, I didn't know whether I was going to wake up in a few hours. And just the fact that I was there, I knew he was going to be scared. And there was no way that I wasn't going to be there. It's that kind of a connection. Or I always say, my mother and Jerry could walk down the street, not say a word, and then at the exact same time, not only would they start singing the same song, but they would start singing it in the same key. So hopefully that illustrates the connection that we all had, to one another.
That's almost like the bond that twins have.
Yes.
Where they just have that connection and they know exactly how to operate with the other one. That is beautiful. But I love what you said about family, because I think you're exactly right. I don't think of family as people that you're blood related to. I mean, there's a certain connection between those people, but it's really the people that you grow together with, that you have those experiences with. That's what really builds a family.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So, after many, many decades, refuse to admit how old I am, but we never had a cross word. And I think that we each kept the other honest and relevant. And we were both in each other's corner. And as I said, it's just one of those inexplicable relationships, but so solid, so beautiful.
I love that. And to grow up in a world of being surrounded by entertainment and creativity and those kind of creative minds, that must have been wonderful.
That's a gift that I wish everyone could experience. And back in New York in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, that creative talent was just off the charts. The currency of the realm was your intellect and your creativity. And I think that the musical theater moved the human condition forward because of that. I mean, you think of all of the incredible musicals beyond, including Jerry's, but also some of the others like West Side Story and Gypsy. And when you think about some of the great shows like South Pacific dealing with bigotry back in the 40s, I mean, we could go from the majors to the minors. There's one called "The Me That Nobody Knows," talking about the just deplorable conditions and the hurt of underserved communities in New York. I mean, just brilliant songs and shows. And the fact that I was there and I can remember going to see Julie Stein, and I must have been about 13 or 14 years old. And he said, "So Jane, you want to be in show business? And I said, yes, Mr. Stein, I do. He said, and I said, do you have any pearls of wisdom? He said, dinner has to be on the table at 6 o'clock every night. And it took me a long time to figure out what it is that he was saying. He said, but you have to work hard and you have to be able to support yourself, along the way. And it's okay. You know, the Giddle family, I mean, literally and figuratively, there wasn't a Broadway giant that I did not have the pleasure of meeting or being touched by it at some point in time. And the
Wow.
other thing too, that it's amazing, and I talk to young people about this all the time. I started as a performer as well. I'm sure that comes as no surprise,
Mhm.
but we had the opportunity to take dance class with the great choreographers or take an acting class or workshop things. And the generosity of the big creative giants was unbelievable. They'd ask us to try something out or we were able to observe. So they brought up an entire community. And I think that the theater really, really was damaged with AIDS, not for just the obvious reasons of the tragic, tragic deaths, but when you had those, you lost one or two generations of brilliant theatrical minds, and the next generation was never able to come up and learn from them. And I think we suffer from it today. I think the musical theater world took a very different turn at the time of AIDS because of that.
Well, the
And
attitudes are different now, right? There's not as much generosity. There's not as much people willing to take the time to grow and develop people. They kind of expect you to be there when you walk in.
that is true. That is true. Things are also crazy expensive now. So time is money. And also, I think, young people today are just incredibly skilled and talented in their own way. What sometimes they might lack is the breadth of knowledge because they haven't had the opportunity to see what different people are doing. But technically,
Yeah.
they're just off the charts. I mean, when I see some of these dancers do what they do, or the singers, their voices are incredible.
Mhm.
Um, I just saw The Outsiders. What a
Oh,
phenomenal show. And when you see how talented these kids are, it's a wow.
they
Uh,
made a musical of that?
they did. Oh, you must.
Ooh.
Oh, it's the hottest ticket in town in New York right now.
Wow, I didn't know that. I loved the book, and I think I don't remember what grade I was in, but that was part of a school, assignment. And then, of course, that was right around the time that the original movie came out. And it still to this day blows my mind how pretty much everybody that was in that movie went on to have quite a career at
Yes,
some level or another. I mean, you had the who's who, but you didn't know it.
exactly. Exactly.
So, how do you feel about? I know that there's a lot going on in literature these days where they're saying, well, this book is no longer appropriate. It deals with things that we don't want to talk about, or people are, a little too soft to deal with these issues. But they're part of our history. They're part of how we got where we are, and hopefully will help us prevent reverting back to those days. Do you see that in the performance world that they've tried to take any of these older things, like especially dealing with race or anything, and tried to
Oh,
ban
wow,
them?
what a perspicacious question. I'm very impressed, Scott.
No, thank you.
So one example is if you look at the Book of Mame, the butler is Asian and speaks in a very broken English kind of a way. And I think most people would consider that to be derogatory. And that's something we would change. I don't think it changes the script in any way, but it's certainly respectful for the times in which we live. But
Mhm.
I wonder if a show like a South Pacific or a MAME or any of these other things, they might be overlooked in today's world. And I think it's a shame because there are a lot of injustices in the world. But if you can't put it up on the stage and look at them, if you can't have that private moment with yourself and to kind of check yourself and say, hey, am I going down the right path here or what's going on? Um, I think about Lacage. I mean, and just think about the timing of Lacage. 1983, gay rights were in their infancy. We've got gay marriage today. I mean, it's
Right.
the adoption of children. I mean, being able to, people are totally free to say who they are. But that wasn't so in 1983. And I think one of the things that was very important to Jerry was to capture people's hearts and minds and saying, as a gay man, I love too, and I can have a sense of family.
Mhm.
But he wasn't militant about it. And by winning people's hearts and minds, everybody, they got it and they cheered. And I think that's sort of the difference of then and now. Everything is so in your face,
Yeah.
whereas in the past you were led to the correct conclusion. There's some songs called Have a Nice Day that has the most derogatory name for every single group. I mean, this is called, parody and satire and everything else. It's not a song that I would necessarily suggest anyone sing today because I'm not sure that audiences, I think the sensitivity level is so high that people might be offended by it. And that's never the attempt. It was actually the opposite. The opposite was to say, if you call everybody these horrible names, you got to look at yourself and you're basically a bigot. But
Sure.
so you have to kind of twist and turn a little bit with the times. But one of Jerry's greatest strengths is when he chose a show, the underlying theme was ubiquitous. So, I mean, if you boil Hello Dolly down, what is it really about? It's about second chances.
Mhm.
Fame is about bigotry. Lacage is about family. And it's something that everybody can relate to. And Jerry just chose the kinds of properties that would endure forever. So his lyrics are true.
Mhm. That's an excellent point, and I think about how certain things have changed with the times. I mean, we couldn't have shows like The Jeffersons or Archie Bunker today. You'd
Oh,
have
no.
groups protesting, and I mean, it's a different world. But I
Yes.
think that was one of the beautiful things, at least, and I think this is maybe a little bit dead, but the way of dealing with some of these topics was through comedy or through art and different ways of presenting it and saying, this is the way it is, but let's look at it and feel okay about it or find ways to, move past it by pointing it out instead of ignoring it. And
Exactly.
I saw when I first moved to Vegas, a friend of mine was directing a play and they were doing a stage read of a play called The Whipping Man. And I'd never heard of it, but I wanted to go support my friends. So I went down to the read, and it was basically about the Civil War ending and slaves being free, but having nowhere to go. So that most of them ended up right back where they were. I mean, they had to be paid now, but that was probably pretty minimal and I'm sure a lot of people got away without paying for a long time. But this was the first time I looked at that situation and said, I never thought about the reality of that before. And then I kind of felt ashamed that that had never dawned on me because now it's so in my face that I'm looking at this going, how did I never think about that? I'm analytical. I follow things through. What happened after the horror movie ended? What happened when they went back to school the next day? I always wonder what next. And it just bothered me so much that I had never considered what actually happened.
But isn't that the gift of art?
Yes. Yes.
And art furthers the human condition in a way that's non threatening and very personal because somebody could see the same show and take very different things away from it. But a really good show, it kind of haunts you, it stays with you, and you think about it more and more and more. And the music is that leave behind that just inhabits your soul. I mean, I don't think there's any mother that hasn't, if they haven't sung the song, If He Walked Into My Life, hasn't at least had every single emotion associated, with that song.
Right.
So, or, a divorcee or a widower who sings Before the Parade Passes By. I mean, these are all feelings that we have. And sometimes a song can crystallize those feelings or make those feelings more accessible.
Mhm. That's very true. Do you feel like we've lost some of that, though, in today's world of just constant judgment and accusations and twisting words? And it just feels like maybe the messages aren't getting through that should be.
Well, people need to lighten up a little bit. I mean, I think there's so many things that we're bombarded with every day. And that to me, again, is the gift of going to see a show. You get to leave the whole world behind. The lights go down, the curtain comes up, and you are totally transported to a different time, place, or maybe, present day. It doesn't matter. But the theater is a safe space, to quote a term. And in that place, it's your personal relationship with whatever is going on. And you can completely reject it, embrace it, expand upon it, want more from it. It doesn't matter. But at least you've given yourself the gift of thinking about a different kind of idea. And to me, music, well, music and dance are the mother forms of art. So we've been doing this as humans for as long as we basically were created. So I think it's super, super important. And yeah, the world is not a gentler, kinder place. It's pretty tough. And that's all the more reason that we have the arts, because it is a place. And also, there's certain programs, like became aware of a program called Literature to Life.
Hmm.
And professional actors will come in and they will act out a piece of literature for
Wow.
kids who are not necessarily readers or interested in theater or anything else like that. And the teachers have to go away and there are no parents. And what happens is it unlocks their souls and it unburdens them, because they can say, hey, yeah, I've had an experience like that. And a lot of times they can't even tell an adult about it or a friend about it, but through theater, it breaks down the barriers and then they can start writing about it. So I think music, theater, dance, it's so important because it allows us to connect with the good, the bad, the ugly. And I
Right.
think it brings us all to a better and happier place.
And in a safe space where you can just, because when I've gone to the theater, unless I'm working a show, because I'm an audio engineer, so I've done a lot of audio at musicals. If I'm just going to a movie or going to a show to enjoy it, I find that the world doesn't exist anymore. I don't see the edge of the screen. I don't see the exit doors. Everything is just like there's just me and whatever's going on.
Yes.
If I come out of that, and sometimes it's intentional, like they want to give you a mental break before the big finale or before the next
Sure.
intense scene, but it's not that hard to get me back in if it's good. If I
Yeah.
don't get sucked back in, then there's another issue. But it's so easy to just get lost and forget that you're physically sitting in a theater next to people you probably don't know, and they're doing whatever they're doing, and you don't even know they're there anymore. It's such an amazing experience.
Yeah, I mean, a full Broadway show runs about 2 hours and 45 minutes, a really long one. And I've been at many a show where that first act goes by, and I could have sworn it wasn't any more than 5 minutes
Yeah.
because I was so engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one that I had a difficult time with, and I just didn't understand it. I understood the premise of it, but it was lost to me, was Pippin. It was 3 hours, which
It's a long time.
that's a lot to ask. And they didn't have an intermission. So it was just all the way through. Or maybe they did. I don't remember. But either way, it just like there's this antagonist, but he doesn't actually ever do anything. So it didn't make sense. Like there was just so much that was disconnected, at least in the version that I saw. But other than that, every single time I've seen something, whether I'm working at it or not, is just been such an amazing experience. I can't say enough that it's something that everybody needs to go do. Even if you don't think you're going to like it, give it a chance. Just go and check it out.
So I can't begin to tell you the number of people, adults, that I will have said, who will say to me, my grandmother took me to my first Broadway show.
Yeah.
Or my mother did, or my father did, or this is what we did every single weekend. And, if I could just ask one thing of your listeners, your audience, it's not only go to see a show, but bring someone younger with you because it can change their world.
I love that. The very first one I ever saw, I was in the third grade. And so I was about 8, and we went downtown Detroit and saw a performance of Jack and the Beanstalk. And I remember it was really cheesy. I mean, it was really for kids, like, oh, that rings the bell, and he pulls out the bell and physically rings it, that kind of comedy.
Right.
but I just remember being so impressed with the costumes and the production and the atmosphere. That was the first thing, walking into the theater and feeling the atmosphere of however they design what they allow you to see, in
So
front of the
Scott,
curtain.
just think about what you're saying right now. You were 8 years old,
Hey,
and look at the detail with which you are recalling that experience.
yes. Yeah. And I only went one time. I mean, that was it. you know but do you feel when you go to a show, is that part of the experience for you? Like, you walk into the theater, you get your seat, and then you just kind of take in the atmosphere of whatever they allow you to see in front of the curtain, whatever they
Yes.
give you.
Yes, and I'm a sucker for an overture. I mean, it bothers me when there isn't an overture because to me, that sets the tone.
Yeah,
And you talk about atmosphere, it just gives you that moment to get into the theater space and just a little taste of what's about to come.
that's very true. For me, Jesus Christ Superstar was something I saw very, very young. In fact, I probably saw that before I saw Jack and the Beanstalk. And that overture is just amazing. And then when
Yes.
you get to see it a few times and you can recall the parts from the overture into where it actually performs and how it
Yes.
plays out, you're like, oh wow, I wouldn't have connected that with this scene, but now every time I listen to the overture, I know what it's connected to, so now I hear it differently.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful experience, and I'm so glad that you've been able to enjoy so much of that throughout your life, but also be so close to it and be really in it.
Yes, yes. Well, I started my career as a dancer, singer, actress, and I had the privilege and pleasure of performing in Hello Dolly with Carol Channing for
Wow.
several hundred performances, and that was just a blast. And oh, what a dolly she was! So your viewers may not know that there were 8 major Hello Dollies or Dolly Levi actresses, and they were all so different. So you may not know this, but Carol Channing was not the first choice.
That's right. But who was?
Ethel Merman.
There you go.
And you could kind of hear it a little bit, in the music. You can just imagine Ethel Merman's voice. And I think Jerry did write Hello Dolly with Ethel Merman's voice, in mind. And she was tired. She was in another show, and she just said no. But she was the eighth Dolly, the last Dolly, and she closed the show. And when she went into the show, Jerry gave her a new number, which
Really?
was love Look in My Window.
Okay. Did she, once she had done the show, did she feel like, I should have done this? I should have just done it from the beginning.
Great question. Don't know the answer to it. But then again, I think things work out exactly the way they're supposed to. Can you imagine Hello Dolly being played by anyone other than Carol to set that iconic role? I don't think
Right.
so. And then Nanette Fabray was offered the role. She declined it. Mary Martin declined the role because
Wow.
she was contracted for another show, which I think failed in about 3 days, but she did eventually become one of the dollies. And then there was Carol, and Carol was the most iconic Hello Dolly ever. I mean, we
Yeah.
all hear her voice in our minds.
And she's so charismatic.
Oh,
She just has a real presence.
well, it was more than a presence. She knew how to handle an audience, and her comedic timing was beyond brilliant. And she knew how to read an audience. This woman never phoned in a performance. I can remember we were performing, it might have been Detroit, or I don't know, there was some baseball game, and she noticed that all of the men had the little earbuds in their ear, and they had their
Oh.
transistor radios listening to the
Mhm.
game because inevitably their wives said, "You have to go." And something happened, and there was a slight roar in the audience, and she knew exactly what happened. So she turns to Horace Van de Gelder and she said, "Horace, we won, we won." And the audience just erupted because she was just that present. Or the scene with the dumplings at the Harmonia Gardens when or the beats or whatever, sometimes it would be 4 times she'd go back and forth. Sometimes it was 12, but she always knew how long she could go and still make the audience hysterical. She was a brilliant, brilliant comedian. And I think sometimes a little bit overlooked. So you had Carol Channing's performance. And then I think equally wonderful was Pearl Bailey's Hello, Dolly. I mean, Pearl made it her own, and there was a sassiness to her that I will never forget. So she and Cab Calloway, teamed up together, and that was beyond spectacular. I'm sorry that was not recorded for,
Yeah.
for posterity. Maybe somebody has an illegal, recording something fine,
Well,
but she was great.
that's always bothered me. I have friends that, they've done plays where I can't go to them. They're out of state or out of the country or whatever. And I'm like, are you guys going to release it on DVD? Are you taping your performance? They're like, we don't tape this stuff. I'm like, how do you not preserve that?
Well, see that you raise a very good question. It's frightfully expensive because the musicians have to be paid and they get residuals. The performers have to be paid. And you've got to respect equity and musicians, 108 and all those other people because that is their career. So it's kind of like skilling.
Mhm.
I do wish, though, to your point, that someone like a Lincoln Center Library or Library of Congress
Yes.
always had the right to go in and film because you never want to lose brilliant choreography.
Yes. I mean, even just for educational purposes, there would be
Precisely.
value in it, let alone the enjoyment or just the historical value.
Exactly. Exactly. So I wish that all could be preserved. So
Yeah.
there's a
Wow.
new business for you.
Yes, exactly. I'm so sorry. I did not realize we've gone over our time. It's just been such a great conversation. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Um, we do need to talk about the catalyst of why you came on the show today. Of course, Jerry's estate has a couple of events coming up that may be of interest. A very unique situation here where he had a grave adjacent to
Actually, it's a crypt.
a crypt.
A crypt. So let me tell you the story very quickly.
Okay.
Jerry purchased this crypt at Pierce Brothers Westwood Memorial, and it's in the heart of Westwood, California. And the so many phenomenal celebrities and artists have been buried there. The list goes on. I'm not going to go into that because I know we're short on time.
Mhm.
However, his crypt, which is not used, is is right in between Hugh Hefner's. He touches Hugh Hefner's, and then one over is Marilyn Monroe. So if you want to spend the rest of eternity next to arguably the two sexiest humans that have lived in our lifetime, you have an opportunity to bid on it on October 25th at Auction Solutions. So if you go to auctionsolutions.com, you'll get to pull it up, and they've got some other amazing things that are going on. But this crypt is literally the opportunity of a lifetime and eternity.
Yes, in eternity. And I would say the frustrating thing, and I'll have that link in the show notes for you guys.
Thank you.
I would say the frustrating thing for me would be being so close to them and not be able to ask them any questions.
Well, how do you know?
Well, that's a good point. I can't argue that.
I think it would be one heck of a party, in the Hall of Memories. You never know. And then the other thing that we're auctioning is Jerry has a foundation with ASCAP Foundation, and part of his legacy is going to be a musical theater program and scholarships for college age kids who are really interested in musical theater. And I'm just so proud that he's doing that. So
Yes.
his personal memorabilia, Doyle's Auction House, is auctioning that on December 14th. And if you go to www.doyle.com, you'll get to see everything. It's been beautifully photographed. And if you need a contact person there, John King will be more than happy to help you. And just a spoiler alert, his piano is being auctioned.
Oh, you know that Debbie Gibson has Liberace's piano.
There you go.
Imagine owning, oh, that would be incredible. I will be posting notices as we get closer to those auction dates through my social media. The links will be in the show notes, but it's always good to have a, hey, this is coming up kind of refresher here and there. So I will post those out to you guys as well. I'm so glad I got a chance to meet you and talk to you. You're just absolutely delightful. And what I love most is just your passion for all of this. I feel that just coming through the screen. It's just amazing. I talk to people who business becomes business, and sometimes the art gets lost in all the things you have to deal with. And it's understandable. But I feel like with you, it's like you're just so excited about all the things.
I am, because to have a Jerry Herman musical in your heart and in your head really makes every day a happy day.
Oh, I love that. I would say let's end on that, but could I indulge you for a moment more and
Yes.
ask you to tell me your best Ethel Merman story?
Oh, I'm not sure I have a great Ethel Merman story, other than Jerry just adored her. The two ladies that Jerry revered and idolized were Judy Garland and Ethel Merman. And for Ethel to have been in one of his shows was an honor beyond imagination. And I think his only sadness is that Judy never really recorded any of his songs.
Mhm.
So I can kind of leave you with that. But as I go through all of
Yeah.
his memorabilia, if Judy Garland's face was on something or if she recorded something, Jerry had it. She was his heart.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show,
Thank
sharing
you.
all this with us. It's just been absolutely amazing. And for you guys that are listening, check out those auction dates. Keep an eye on the social media. And you know what? Go see a musical and take somebody with you.
Yes, agreed. Thank you.
Hold on for me for one moment, if you would. For you guys, thanks for checking out the show and joining us for another week of the HaskinCast podcast. We'll be back next Wednesday with, I don't know, something. We'll see you guys. Cheers.